Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the FantasyPros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me is Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, how you doing today?
Today's Christmas is here, buddy.
What do you
Christmas
mean? What's going on?
There's an actual. No, I had a few friends text me yesterday, say, "Hey, Mike, I'm not sure if you heard, but the actual NFL's back tomorrow," and I was like, "Thank you so much for letting me know. I will make sure to tune in." We have football tonight, and if you're not in a great mood today, well, you're in the wrong industry.
Yeah, this is a great day. It's the best of days. I would trade in my next 8 birthdays just for this day. So I'm very excited. So today we're going to talk some DFS. We've got a great guest with us. It's Chris Meany, head of content over at Fade the Noise, the only guy who can simultaneously offer advice on football, baseball, and hockey all at the same time. You can find him on Twitter at his name, Chris Meany. That's Meaney. What's up, Chris? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It does feel like Christmas morning, or back in the day when you were just you knew maybe you were going to get a Nintendo or your favorite football game, and you were just super excited and you couldn't sleep, and you wake up and it's there, and you watch and play football all day. So super pumped to be here, guys. Thanks for having me, and ready for week 1, that's for sure.
Are you sure you don't want to just talk hockey? Because, look, I'm from New York. My whole family, from the island. So the Islanders in the finals right now. Should we just make this a hockey podcast? Or?
I'm surprised you even brought up hockey. I know that kind of comes with the territory of mentioning me in the sports I cover, which is fine.
No, I mean, it's unique, frankly, and you're so knowledgeable about it. It's hard. Look, a guy like Tags who just does NFL, he basically works a quarter of the time. That's all he really does.
Yeah, he only writes 40,000 word articles.
Oh, don't get started on that primer. Whatever. All right, whatever. Okay, we'll talk football.
Nice work, though.
We'll talk. Yeah, it's good job, Dax. Good job. By the way, everybody, I hope you've already read it. But anyway, let's get into this here. For week 1, the plan is we're going to start with your favorite. We'll go the priciest, the pricier cash game option at each position. Then we'll discuss a couple of cash game value plays at each position. Then we'll do GPP gamble, and then we'll finish up with your favorite stack of the week and your lock of the week. That good with you guys?
Sounds fantastic.
I don't know why I asked that, by the way, on every podcast. I'm always like, how does that? Question. Is that okay?
What if I said no? What if I told you no?
Exactly.
Scrap the show.
We would still be doing it no matter what you say. All right. So look, before we get into it, if you play DFS, then you really need to be using our DFS Optimizer over at FantasyPros.com/optimizer. It saves you hours of research. It uses projections that are constantly being updated. It lets you import your own custom projections if you want that. It supports FanDuel, DraftKings, Fantasy Draft, and Yahoo contests. And you can generate up to 150 lineups at a time with our multi-lineup generator. And it's not just NFL. It works for NBA and MLB. Now, only Hall of Fame subscribers can use our DFS tools. If you're not one yet, we have got a special $10 offer right now for 6 months of our Hall of Fame package. You get more details on that. Claim that offer over at FantasyPros.com/offers. Also, check out our Betting Pros NFL podcast. I am in the DraftKings Pick'em contest. That is a $1,500 entry with a guaranteed $1 million top prize, 5 picks against the spread each week. I'm recording this week's episode today. It'll be up by Friday. Matt Peralt, who's entered into the Circa Sports Million, a very similar contest, he's going to be breaking down his picks. I'm going to be breaking down my picks for week 1. So if you want our AFC or NFC preview, we did that last week and the week before. You can find those also on the podcast stream. Check it out at bettingpros.com/podcast or search for the Betting Pros NFL podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, guys, let's get started here. Let's start with our favorite pricier cash game play of the day. Let's start with you, Chris, and let's go at running back. Who's your favorite, pretty pricey play that you're going to be doing this week?
Yeah, so it's easy to look up at the top of the board and see Christian McCaffrey at $10,000 on DraftKings, $2,100 more than Dalvin Cook over on DK, and then $1,300 more than Cook on FanDuel. But I'm going to stick inside that game and just get away from McCaffrey and go to Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs checks in at a decent price, 8.2 on FanDuel, 6.8 on DK. This Carolina team really struggled defensively. That's a big part of why they just drafted as many defensive players as they could in this previous draft. But no Luke Kuechly there, and the second most fantasy points to running backs last season in a half-point setting at 29, and 32nd in DVOA against the run as well. So I expect, the Raiders to throw maybe a little bit more. I know they brought in some weapons, and Jacobs isn't a guy who's going to catch the ball a ton. He only had 4 games with 3 receptions, but he also had 6 games with at least 20 carries. So, overall, in the grand scheme of things, I do expect him to get a heavy workload on the ground, be the goal line back there. So for Josh Jacobs, I just think he's going to get a lot of runs. So that's the one cash game near the top. Cash game RB that I really like.
Yeah, I think Jacobs is the guy if you're not going to go with McCaffrey. I do think McCaffrey, you can maybe get away with it on FanDuel, as opposed to DraftKings, even though I think it's $10,000 on both. But that price is a little easier to swallow when you're on FanDuel. But other than that, I do think it's Jacobs. He's the 4th price, at least on FanDuel. He's the fourth highest salaried running back on FanDuel. But yeah, he's worth it. I mean, the game's probably going to be pretty close. I forget what the spread if it's moved to 3 at this point, but it's not going to be a runaway. He's going to get a lot of play, even if he doesn't factor in heavily into the passing game, like, has been rumored throughout this offseason. He's still going to get so much work on the ground, and just one of the few guys who I feel like, especially this week, I mean, Tags, I know we've talked about it a little bit in the past, how week 1 is like usually a great week for DFS for guys like you, especially because it's been out there. There's a lot of information. You know what necessarily to expect. It's great for people to play. This year it's a little harder. There's no preseason game, so I feel like those locked in options, the guaranteed touches, especially at running back, they're just not really going to be there. So I really like Jacobs as well as a play. I don't know about you, Tags, if that's a guy that you're sort of targeting as your highest price guy, or is there another guy that you're pivoting off to?
He was the first guy I was going to mention. You guys are right in the same line with me. The Panthers last year allowed 18% more fantasy points than any other team in the league on the ground. So I don't even really care what Jacobs offers through the air this week. He should rush for over 100 yards. He has a chance at multiple touchdowns. This is one of those teams that has gone through a lot of changes, new head coach, new defensive coordinator, all that stuff. They've had a lot of turnover on their defense. Granted, last year it wasn't great, allowing 5.32 yards per carry, a touchdown every 14 carries. But with no offseason, it's going to be a lot more difficult for defenses that are doing this. Offenses know what they're doing. Defenses have to react, which means communication is vital. And if they don't have that yet, it's going to be a real big problem for them. So I love Jacobs. He honestly, he might be talked about a little later in the show, but he's someone I absolutely love. Christian McCaffrey's not a bad play either, but it's going to be hard to swallow his price considering the uncertainty we have around. And I want to be clear before we get into even more, because right now we're talking about cash game plays.
Right.
I'm typically a cash game player. I'm better in cash games. I'm just too level-headed for tournaments, where it's like tournaments you have to take some shots on players. But I also want to be clear about this too, is I think this is a great week to play tournaments, especially for someone like myself, because there's going to be so many people buying hype on players, selling it on others, worried about things. They're going to be going back and forth. I think you should build a lineup that looks almost cash game-ish, and then put one player in there that you believe is going to be like less than 5% owned, and I think you're going to have a big edge in the competition. So basically take the cash game plays, you can put them into a lineup, and then just change one player to an upside play, like maybe like a John Ross, who can catch a long play for a touchdown, Henry Ruggs, someone like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jacobs is great. I don't think I can get to McCaffrey this week, considering all of the high-priced options we have here, and there's just not very many values that we're certain about. Dalvin Cook at 7,900 does interest me, though, against Green Bay. That's a team that really struggled against the run. Kirk Cousins couldn't do anything against that pass rush last year. So that game's in Minnesota. They are favorites there. That the correlation between being a home favorite, those things play very well for Dalvin Cook. He's 7,900. They took it easy on him in training camp. He's playing for a new contract. There's a whole lot of reasons I like Dalvin Cook this year, on top of the fact that Green Bay they're not a very good run-stopping defense. So those are the 3 top players. I just know that I can get to McCaffrey, but Josh Jacobs I love that you guys brought him up.
Yeah, I mean, I made one FanDuel lineup with McCaffrey in it. It's kind of ugly. I mean, you can do it, though. I don't think you can do it on DraftKings. Like, it's really, really ugly if you do it on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think you might be able to get away with it. But if you're not McCaffrey, we're all in agreement here. I mean, Cook, at least on FanDuel, is $500 more. There's absolutely no reason, in my opinion, to pay that when you could get Jacobs, who's one of the true, guaranteed touches, going to get work. And, there's all this stuff out there about how Gruden was pissed that he didn't win, Rookie of the Year. So,
let's
lean into it. And again, you mentioned, by the way, without the preseason games, Tags, the defense is needing to adjust. Don't forget how young this Panthers defense is, and they obviously lost Luke Kuechly. Yeah. So as bad as they were against the run last year, I forget how many touchdowns, 31 or something on the ground. It's just a smash play, I think.
Well, are you guys worried? Are you worried to fade McCaffrey? Because he actually matches up really well with this team. Like, the Raiders allowed the 4th most fantasy points through the air to running backs last year. Reportedly, they're lining him up at wide receiver. We know he's going to get tons of touches. There were 2 games last year where McCaffrey scored fewer than 19 half PPR points. Like, that's just stupid.
Ridiculous.
Right. It's a new offense, and there's just, in cash, the reason I can't do it in cash is it is a new offense. We don't know if it's built around him. It should be. But are you guys worried about fading him in cash games? Because McCaffrey is just so damn good. And the matchup, linebackers are the ones that are typically covering the running backs coming out of the backfield that are safeties. And they have legitimately 3 new starting linebackers in Las Vegas. So I'm worried about fading McCaffrey, but I don't think I can afford him.
What about you, Chris? Are you worried about fading him?
Yeah, in cash, maybe slightly. In tournaments, not so much. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, in cash, it just really... It's tough when you put him in. You just plug him in right away on DraftKings, and your average remaining salary is like $5,000. Right, so you're really just not going to get a solid balance. You're going to have to take. We'll get into some cash values, and even still, Tags, I thought you brought up a good point earlier when you were just talking about cash values. There's still just some uncertainty with some of the running backs, like like a Taylor. How many touches is he going to really get? And what is a great matchup? But Marlon Mack is going to get some touches too. So it's tough. You're really, I think. I don't want to say you're completely rolling the dice when you have McCaffrey, because you are going to have to take some shots. Like you said, Tags, maybe you take a John Ross or somebody that you think could potentially blow up that normally would be a tournament play, but you're going to have to take those shots with McCaffrey. So I'm just going to completely fade him off the board. I think that there's enough value at the running back position to some guaranteed touches with some of the backs, but it's always risky to fade a guy like McCaffrey. 31 DK points per game last season. 31. Right. The next closest guy is Dalvin Cook at 21.6. Like, he was unbelievable last season.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to wide receiver here. You've got obviously the big 3 that are out there with Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, at least in terms of price. What are you thinking here, Chris? Who's your favorite priciest option that you're going with for cash games?
I think it's Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams at 7.3 over on DraftKings, and over on FanDuel, he's 8,000. He's the 3rd highest price. Julio is checked in with a higher price tag than him over on FanDuel. Listen, we all know that there's no competition. We know we've been talking about it all summer long, that Green Bay didn't do anything to help out Aaron Rodgers, at least offensively. They didn't grab any offensive weapons. Devin Funchess opted out. Alan Lazard, we're trying to get excited about him. It's
not trying. Already excited. Sorry, go ahead.
Fair enough, but Adams is going to get a ton of targets. This is a great matchup for him. This Vikings secondary used to be good a few years back. It's not the same. It's very young. They allowed the 7th most fantasy points to wideouts last season. I expect him to be up against Holton Hill, which I think is a plus. Hill could potentially break out, but this is just a really plus matchup for Devontae Adams. So I'm not going to overthink this. I'm not a crazy big fan of Aaron Rodgers. He only had like 7 games with at least 2 passing touchdowns last season, which is just, it kind of blows your mind to think about that. But Adams is just, after he came back from that foot injury last season, he was just a target monster. So that's what I'm kind of looking for here. It's the same thing with, RBs. I want some touches. I want the goal line work. With Adams, I just know he's going to flirt with double-digit targets in this.
Is Adams your guy here, Tags, for the pricey option?
Oh, for the expensive one, yeah, absolutely. Like, he's like a no-brainer for me. I'll go down a little bit further to talk about someone else, though. DJ Chark, I have him ranked as a top 8 wide receiver this week, and I think compared to ECR, I'm extremely high on him, so I'm guessing he won't be as high owned as he will on my rosters.
Is that what you do, by the way, Tags? Can I just ask, when you're looking at your DFS lineups, do you try to compare your rankings versus how the expert consensus has it and try to find values that way?
No, so what I do, actually use our DFS Optimizer on the site, and you're allowed to select experts that you want in there. So I'll choose myself and someone else that I'm going to be looking at that particular week, and I will basically it basically puts the projections with those analysts that you want in there, and then I look at it and I see what are my best values based on my rankings. So DJ Chark is popping up as like a crazy value at 6,300 against the Colts. They let go of Pierre Desir this offseason, so they're expecting Rock Ya-Sin, a guy that was a rookie last year, allowed almost 10 yards per target in his coverage. They're expecting him to take a step forward. And then they signed Xavier Rhodes, which is kind of a joke. Xavier Rhodes allowed a 127.8 quarterback rating in his coverage last year. He's been trending down for the last 2 years, so there's absolutely zero reason why people think that he should be able to hang with someone like DJ Chark. And on top of that, the Colts have been like a nasty run defense. Like, you don't run the ball against them. I want to say that over the last 2 years since Frank Reich took over, there's been one running back that's rushed for over 100 yards against them, so you just don't get it done on the ground. We know this Jacksonville Jaguars team is going to fall behind the Colts, so Chark has been getting hyped through camp. They're moving him into the slot. They're moving him wherever they need to create a matchup, and last week he just happened to light up this secondary for quite a big performance. So I'm treating him as a wide receiver 1 in season long, so in DFS at 6,300, I am digging him.
So neither one of you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Were you going to say something about that?
I was just saying I love that call. Yeah, he was my he's my cash value. I love Chark. Yeah, another guy who's just going to get a lot of targets.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys. Neither one of you then is willing to pay up for Michael Thomas. Then 8,800 on FanDuel, I believe 9,000 on DraftKings. Because it's a lot. Obviously, it's a great matchup. They got better as in the pass defense as the season went on last year. But they allowed a ton of fantasy points, generally speaking, to number 1 wide receivers. You're probably going to have a pretty high scoring game. He's probably, kind of puts up the really high floor with the really high ceiling. So even in terms of, points per dollar, he's probably got to be up there. And neither one of you is willing to pay up for the top receiver off the board. It's just about
like that Devontae Adams, you're getting such a discount. If it was closer, like, let's say Michael Thomas was like 8,100 and Devontae Adams was 7,300 or something like that, like he is, I would consider it more, because Michael Thomas did dominate the secondary, and I think people overrate the Bucs secondary between Carlton Davis, because he played better down the stretch. But it's still Michael Thomas last year against this team in 2 games, 19 receptions for 296 yards and 3 touchdowns. Clearly, they have no idea how to contain him. But it goes back to the McCaffrey argument, where can you find the salary to use him? And I think you're going to get just as many targets and just as good of a matchup for Devontae Adams against Minnesota, who is starting 3 new cornerbacks. Like, I don't know what combination they're going to use, but it seems like it's going to be Holton Hill, Mike Hughes, and then one of the rookies, maybe Cameron Dantzler. So it's just a matchup. Again, Minnesota, you don't run the ball against them. Everson Griffin is not playing in this game. Yannick has only been with the team for like a week. It's just because Devontae Adams is such a value. That's the only reason I can't consider Michael Thomas.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Let's go to quarterback here. I mean, Chris, is it Lamar Jackson or bust, or what? What are you doing at quarterback here for your pricey play?
No, it's not. Again, it's kind of the same thing. Like McCaffrey, we know he's a great play, and Thomas, I mean, Texas rattled off all those numbers, almost 200 yards in one game against them last season. It's just the drop off in terms of price. I mean, 8,100, it's really going to strap you. I have no problem if you can find a way to get there with Lamar Jackson. I'm just going to drop down a little bit and go to Russell Wilson. Yep. I like both quarterbacks in this matchup, and you're looking at a high total. If you're just new to DFS, I think one of the things you need to look at is just Vegas. You see the team implied totals as well with Seattle 25.5. That's number 4 on the main slate, and the over-under between the Seahawks and the Falcons at 49. So we're probably going to see a lot of points. I know Seattle wants to run the football. They've run the football a lot over the past few years. I believe only the Ravens over the last 2 years have ran more than them, but even still, Russell Wilson, he doesn't run around like he used to, but he averaged 21 rushing yards per game last season. There's a little bit of a floor there. This Falcons defense is not spectacular. He's got 2 solid wide receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So I think Russell Wilson at his price point at $7K, you're really just going to save yourself, about $1,000, and you can roll with him there. I mean, in terms of just FanDuel points per game, he was number 3. In terms of DraftKings points per game on this slate, he was number 2. So it's a little bit of a drop off. You're not going to get that same floor with Lamar, but it's a better matchup against the Falcons.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Wilson is the guy. He's 8,400 on FanDuel. I think you want every piece really of this game in every way you can get it in DFS. How about you, Tags? Is Wilson your guy as well?
That's more of a tournament play for me. I can't play Russell Wilson in cash. If I'm going to pay up a quarterback in cash, it's either going to be Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson makes it crazy. It's tough to pay up for these guys today. There's just so much uncertainty, and I've usually in week 1 there's a lot of values because these prices came out 3 weeks ago,
right?
And you would think that there's been so much that has changed that these values would just show up, pop off the page, but I'm not really seeing them. I'm seeing more tournament. There can be some values for sure, but there's a lot of uncertainty. Guys like Antonio Gibson, guys like James Robinson. We don't really know what to expect there. So it's probably better to pay up for guaranteed touches, whereas a quarterback, obviously replaceable production. Lamar Jackson at 8,100, they're making it really tough to fit him in. But Josh Allen is a guy that he averaged 6.7 more fantasy points when the Bills won last year. There were just 2 games all year where he scored fewer than 16 fantasy points. So he gives you a decent floor. We know that the Jets obviously lost 2 of their best players, C.J. Mosley for the year. They traded away Jamal Adams. This team just sucks. Let's be honest. Dan knows all about it. He's a Jets fan. So Josh Allen should be good to go in this game at 6,500, but I'm probably going to go cheaper than all these guys, to be fair, this weekend at quarterback.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that on our next section when we talk about some value plays at cash. Let's go to tight end, though, here. You've got, Kittle is crazy, at least on FanDuel. I mean, 8,000. But what are you thinking here, Chris? Who's your big money play that you like here at tight end?
Yeah, I love Kittle. You got to love the matchup against Arizona. They were absolutely brutal against tight ends last season. But, again, much like a lot of, the top price player that we're talking about, and then all of a sudden the value, there's a big drop off between Kittle and Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
And Philadelphia heads into week 1 with a lot of question marks. Alshon Jeffrey is not 100%. Jalen Reagor, I know he was in pads yesterday, but I don't expect him to play, and if he does, he's going to be limited. Deshaun Jackson, who I'll talk about in a little bit, I do like him, but Zach Ertz is he's safe. He's going to get a ton of targets, and he's really just eaten up this Washington team over the last 6 games, dating back to the last 3 years. 35 catches, 44 targets, 395 yards. It's 6 catches per game, just over 7 targets, and just shy of 70 yards per game. So I know he's a threat in the red zone. He's Carson Wentz's boy. There's 2 offensive linemen missing, on the Eagles. Miles Sanders is not completely 100%. I wouldn't be shocked if, Carson Wentz drops back here, 35, maybe even 40 times in this game. I don't know if Washington can put up a lot of offense on their end, but Carson Wentz, or Zach Ertz rather, at $5,800, he just screams value, and he's a strong cash game play.
Yeah, he's 6,600 on FanDuel as well. And again, at a $1,400 drop from Kittle at this point, I get that Kittle is going to smash, but yeah, especially Alshon Jeffrey's not going to play. There's buzz about how good Jalen Reagor looks in practice, but I'm assuming he's not going to play. So he's really the guy who I was also pivoting off of as my price here play. How about you, Tags?
Yeah. I mean, if you can get Kittle, that's great. It sucks that he costs basically just as much as our number 3 wide receiver on the week,
right,
which is Devontae Adams.
Right.
So you're paying up for him, but knowing that they're missing Deebo Samuel, I don't think is going to play. Brandon Iuke is coming off a hamstring injury. He's a rookie in his first NFL game. There's just so many questions around this team that it's like, all right, why not attack with tight ends? And we talked to Jeff Fisher on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how difficult it is to slow down a tight end to game plan against those guys because they do stay in block almost half the time. So you're essentially removing a defender from your defense on those plays. It's really difficult to do, especially against a team like the 49ers who run the ball so well. I do like Kittle if I can get up to him, but Ertz, I'm with you guys. Ertz is a fantastic value at 5,800. It's a similar situation, right? The matchup is really good against Washington. They're missing pass catchers all over the field. Let's not pretend that Deshaun Jackson's going to get 12 targets or anything like that. So these targets have to go somewhere. And in a matchup against Philadelphia, I would say or against Washington, I'd say that their strength is on their front 7. So it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to run the ball. Zach Ertz isn't much of a blocker. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that West Coast pass attack, get the ball in Ertz's hand. So I could see a situation where Ertz gets 10 targets in this game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, at 5,800, if you can't get up to Kittle, I'm definitely okay with Ertz.
Yeah, same thing on FanDuel, given where their pricing is. So I think we're all in agreement there. Let's go now to some more value plays in cash games. Again, Tags, you talked about, the tournament versus cash this week, but coming in here, cash game, obviously you want to go a little safer where you can. So, Chris, let's start with you, and let's start with the running back. Who's more of your value plays at running back in cash games?
Yeah, so I don't even know if this is really a value play. I'll save one for the end. If Tags doesn't mention him, I think he might. But over on FanDuel, Dan, I know you're a big FanDuel player over there. So, I mean, Joe Mixon stands out to me as a value on FanDuel, where I'm looking on DraftKings and I see him at 6,700. He's 100 cheaper than Jacobs. I'd rather go there. But if you're a FanDuel player, like Mixon, I think is mispriced at 73 in what I think is a pretty good matchup. And the Chargers struggled and they gave up the 11th most fantasy points to running backs last season. Mixon seems healthy right now. I know he was dealing with some migraines. He got the contract out of the way. Again, I'm just looking for a running back who's going to get some touches. 278 carries, the 5th most last season among running backs. 7th in touches. We know he's not a big, player in the passing game, but I think Joe Burrow, under center, I think honestly he could change that. It's not like Mixon can't catch. We get frustrated. I get frustrated seeing him only get, 3-4 targets and a couple catches because I think he can do more. I know Giovanni Bernard will probably be mixed in a little bit, but Mixon's the goal line back there, and I just think that he is a strong value over on FanDuel. And if you want to get, I suppose I'll just bring him up, Tags. Yeah. Keep an eye on Montgomery. I don't know if David Montgomery doesn't play. I know he's trending up. I know Tariq Cohen had said he looks better, almost like he didn't even suffer an injury. But if Montgomery doesn't play, I mean, Tariq Cohen's going to get a lot of play. He's a better player on DraftKings because you're going to get that full point for a catch. But, you're going to get the early games. So you're going to have reports pretty early if Montgomery can't suit up or not. And I just feel like if he doesn't play, Cohen on DK at 4,900 he just screams value.
How do you feel, Tags? What do you think first talk about Cohen and Mixon, and then give us some of your value plays at running back?
Yeah, I'm good with Mixon's fine. Definitely considering AJ Green, the question marks there. The strengths for the Chargers are definitely in the cornerback unit. They might have the best cornerback unit in the league, so I like the Mixon call there. As for Cohen, I think he's perfectly fine at 4,900. Even if Montgomery does play, I don't think that he's going to be playing a full complement of snaps. And the only other player they have on the roster right now is Ryan Nall because they cut Artavis Pierce. So Tariq Cohen at 4,900 makes a lot of sense against the Lions team that, I mean, they're not a very good defense. They have some moving parts on there. They're playing some young players. Matt Patricia's defense is not very good. And if Trubisky is going to play this close to the vest and say, I cannot lose these games, I have to win these games, you might see him take a few less chances, and Tariq Cohen's a guy they get the ball into space. There's nobody around him. So I definitely like that call. Going down, I mean, I like Chris Carson as a value play at 6,200 on DraftKings.
He was the guy who I was going to mention as another
I like him. I just don't know if you're going to be able to fit him with the wide receivers because I don't know of any wide receivers under like 4,900 that I'm comfortable playing. And so I don't think that I can get up and pay that much for running backs this week. So I might be forced to play someone like Antonio Gibson at 4K or James Robinson. These two they're guys that are not guaranteed anything more than like, I would say 8 touches in the games, but they both have the potential to get up to like 15 touches, right? Antonio Gibson is obviously the most electrifying option they have out of that backfield. J.D. McKissick is just a guy. Peyton Barber is just a guy. Gibson for 4K, it feels fine. I'd rather do it in tournaments, but at the same time, he's going to be over-owned. Mm-hmm. So many people are going to own Antonio Gibson. It's so it's almost like you kind of have to. With those players, you kind of just take the discount and you say, I'll take it in cash at 4K because if he misses, so many people are going to own him at that price, it's not going to kill you. It's really not. But if he hits at 4K, it is going to crush you if you don't have him in your lineup. So I think Antonio Gibson at 4K is someone to think about. But yeah, Chris Carson, with Rashad Penny out, Carlos Hyde, I know they said that he's going to be a good complement, and I think he's going to steal some work. But the Falcons, it's a matchup where he should score at least once in that game. So at 6,200, it kind of makes sense.
All right, how about wide receivers over here? Who's a couple, Chris, of your cash game value plays at wide receiver?
Well, Kenny Galladay, I think, is mispriced on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's the 6th highest priced wide receiver, which seems fair. But on DK, there's 13 other wideouts that are more expensive than him at $6,200. I think this could be actually a sneaky little game. I know we're talking cash, but from tournaments, Detroit secondary is obviously not great. And I don't know, I'm not completely sold on this Bears defense. I think it is a top 10 defense for sure, but Kenny Galladay, 7 targets per game. Stafford's going to drop back and throw it. As much as Matt Patricia wants to run the football with all of his running backs out there, I just feel like Kenny Galladay is completely mispriced on DK, and I just want to take advantage of that. And Tags is right. Like, if you're just looking for some cash value, I mean, he mentioned $4,900. I'm sure he likes Lazard, but there's really just not a lot here in terms of who's going to get the targets. I mean, Marvin Jones stands out 5'5", sure. McLaurin 5'6", but I just want to go up to that second tier, and I just feel like Galladay, in terms of ranking, you mentioned Chark at $6,300. He's the same price, basically, at $62. So I just feel like he is a lock and loaded wide receiver 1. Don't worry about that Bears and the low total at 44. I actually think it could certainly creep up closer to 50. So I just feel like Galladay is mispriced. And there's not a lot. You're looking at all of these players, and the pricing has come out 3 weeks ago. Yeah, Gibson 4K, Robinson 4K. But there's not a lot of just mispriced players, and I think Galladay is certainly one of them.
Galladay's listed with a hamstring. Is that right?
Yeah, but we got to keep an eye on him. He was limited, but I think, all signs that I read is that he's going to play. But
yeah, I would imagine he'll play. It just worries me in cash to play someone like that, and because it's not like he's dirt cheap. I'm going to go down to 4,900, and that's where I'm going to say Deshaun Jackson. Is a guy I'll play at 4,900 in this matchup. Ronald Darby. I mean, the dude's. He's toast. He's basically the new Josh Norman in Washington. He's not very good. Deshaun Jackson, every single year, it seems like week one's just the week where he's going to go off. So I definitely dig him as a value play. Another one that we talked about on the sit show yesterday was Jameson Crowder. Jameson Crowder is a fantastic play at 5,200 if you're looking for a value. His two of his biggest games last year came against the Bills. He crushed them. They have great perimeter cornerback play. Well, one cornerback with Tre'Davious White. They stop tight ends like the best of them. They're not a team that you run the ball all over. We're going to see a lot of short passing to Le'Veon Bell and Jameson Crowder. So, and especially in a PPR format like DraftKings, if you need save some money at wide receiver, I think Crowder makes a lot of sense.
Let me ask you guys, how do you feel about Jarvis Landry? Now, it's obviously not a great matchup, and he's coming off the hip injury, but it sounds like he's going to be okay to play. He's at 6,300, at least on FanDuel. And again, against Baltimore last year, 19 targets, 15 catches, 241 yards. He's a reliable option, or is that just somebody who, A, given that he's coming off the injury, B, the matchup, you're not really going for in a cash game?
Kind of both. The injury worries me, especially in knowing it's a new offense. We don't know if he's going to get the target share that he used to. I don't think he's going to. I think they're going to try and run the ball a lot. But yeah, I'm not. I mean, I would rather play Anthony Miller this week for 5K.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's fair. Another guy who I'm looking at a little bit in cash games is Tyler Lockett. Again, this is a game that I want a part of. He's 6,800 on FanDuel, at least, which isn't a bad price. I think he's going to. I just want every piece of the passing game that I can get. So I'm fine to roll with Wilson. I'm good to roll with Lockett, at least on FanDuel personally. Strikes me as a little bit of a value based on where I have him ranked, especially this week in regular fantasy. Let's go to quarterback here. Who's your cash game value play at quarterback, Chris?
So I thought that, Josh Allen was a bit of a value. I'm with you, Tags. In terms of quarterbacks, I typically like to get somebody in cash that can run around, but I'll go down to Gardner Minshew at $5,800. It's kind of the same sort of feel as a quarterback last season that was 5th in rushing yards per game, 5th in carries per game, 11th in red zone rushing attempts per game. I don't know exactly what is going on with that backfield. James Robinson at 4K, Zigbo is now on IR, and Chris Thompson, I'm sure, can catch a few balls out of the backfield. But for Gardner Minshew at $5,800 on DK and $6,700 in FanDuel, this is somebody that I'm going to like a lot and all year long until he jumps up in price. I know Jacksonville is a bad football team. They're just going to have to throw the football a ton. So I feel like Minshew, week in and week out, he's probably going to be near the top in terms of just passing attempts. So at $5,800, and you already mentioned Chark, he was a value for me as well at 63. I think it's a nice little underrated stack that could work out for you.
What do you think about that, Tex?
Yeah, no, I like Minshew. He was actually one of the 3 quarterbacks I was going to mention in this spot because there's 3 quarterbacks because we know when you get down to the end of your lineup, most of the time I'll see what I have left for a quarterback or a defense. And this week it's like $200 might make the difference between playing someone and not playing them. So I have Gardner Minshew at 5,800. I had Tyrod Taylor, which is probably my favorite, at 5,600. Offers that floor you want in a cash game lineup. The ceiling should be there against the Bengals. And then the last one, obviously, Mitch Trubisky at 5,400. I think that he's a value there. But if I had my choice of the 3, I'd probably play Tyrod. But if you like Minshew a little bit better and you have $200 to spare, I'm not opposed.
Are you willing to go with Trubisky in a cash game lineup, Tax?
Being that there's only a $200 difference between Tyrod and Mitch, I probably don't have to do that. Do I think it's a bad idea? No, because basically the way that I think about like DraftKings especially is you think about you need 2.5x with your players as a minimum. So if you're paying $5,400 for Trubisky, you need him to hit basically 13 fantasy points. That's more than doable. Every time he's played against this team under Matt Nagy against Matt Patricia, he's thrown at least 3 touchdown passes. He rushed for a touchdown in one of the games too. So I do think that he gets there. I have him ranked as I think my number 15 or number 16 quarterback this week. So to get him at 5,400 is cheap. But again, Tyrod offers a higher floor just because he's going to be mobile. Without Mike Williams there, he's going to scramble quite a bit. And this Bengals team just allowed tons and tons of rushing yards to quarterbacks last year.
All right, let's pivot here to tight end. Chris, who's your cash game value play at tight end?
Yeah, there's a few I actually like. I got 3 written down here, but Hayden Hurst, 5-2 on FanDuel, 4-3 on DK. Again, just going back to that high total game, I think there's going to be a lot of offense. And then if you're just playing on DraftKings, Jack Doyle stands out at 3-6 for me. I would fade him at 5-3 over on FanDuel. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, you just rather play Hayden Hurst there in that high total game. But Jack Doyle, I mean, ever since Frank Reich, we know what Frank Reich, I mean, even in Philadelphia using all the tight ends, the Philly special, he goes over to Indy, and he's acquiring tight ends. He brings back Trey Burton. I mean, last year they ranked 3rd in target share to the tight end position, 29%. So, and the Jags 3rd worst in DVOA against the tight end position as well. So I think Jack Doyle, I mean, Phillip Rivers, I'm not a big believer in him, but it's an easy completion for him. And we know what he's been able to do over the past few years. He's comfortable with Frank Reich. They worked together at the time when he was an offensive coordinator with the Chargers. So Rivers is going to come in, control the clock, manage, run the football, but I think he'll utilize Jack Doyle.
Yeah, I'm not huge on players changing teams in this first game, so with Hurst is like my exception to it in particular, right? Because I just think when he's going to fill that role, given what Hooper left off, given how targeted Hooper was in the red zone, given the 7.5 targets per game roughly that he averaged in this game, again, this is a game that I want to target for DFS purposes. So Hurst was my guy as well for a cash game value play in FanDuel, especially when you look at the other values. How about you, Tags?
I am away from Hurst this week. I think that he's going to be played a lot for obvious reasons. Seahawks were terrible against tight ends last year, but adding Jamal Adams is a guy that helped the Jets shut down tight ends. Like, he's one of the better cover safeties. So I'm going to stay away from him in his first game in a uniform. Jack Doyle did not do great against Jacksonville last year, but again, the quarterback play was a lot different. Trey Burton is on IR. Mo Alley Cox is a guy that was on the PUP list until just like a week ago. Jack Doyle at 3,600 on DK. If you're looking for a really cheap tight end, that's where I'd go. I think that he's locked and loaded for at least 6 targets, and if you find a tight end like that for 3,600, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, again, he's 5,300 on FanDuel, so it just doesn't make sense really to play from there.
No, not over there.
No, not at all. All right, let's talk about DST for a minute for your defense. Let's start with Tags here, because I don't actually even think I gave Chris a heads up on this. So we'd be talking about this. But Tags, who's a value play that you like over at defense?
I mean, I'm going to go minimum. They did this a couple times last year on DraftKings, and I loved it when they did it because it allows you so much flexibility. But if you want to play like the Dolphins for 2K, I understand it's the Dolphins. I know that. They've added a lot of players in their defense this year. The Patriots did lose their starting right tackle. He opted out for the year. Cam Newton's under center. Cam Newton has been a guy that is prone to turnovers at times. It's his first game in a brand new system. But 2K, again, it allows you to do some really good things in your lineup. I would much rather pay up at one of the skill position players than pay up at defense. So unless you're in a tournament, try and go for one of those cheap defenses. If you want to go Cardinals at 2,100, I don't even mind that. Yeah, but it's probably going to be Miami for 2,000.
Is that always how you do it with your defenses, Tags? Do you never pay up for a defense?
In cash, pretty much, yeah. I almost never do, unless it's like a crazy week where I have like $1,000 left over, and I'm like, all right, I guess I should pay up for a defense. But, but yeah, in reality, I mean, unless it's like a obvious, like you can't not play it defense for a value at 3K or something like that. But when they give you a 2K option, it's just like, how do you pass on that?
Right. No, I get it. How about you, Chris? Do you have anybody?
I did that all last year. It's the same thing, Tags. I mean, 2K, I don't want to call it a free square, but you just save so much money. I mean, yeah, we want to play the Bills against the Jets, of course, right? $3,700. I just don't want to spend that on my defense, or $36 with the Eagles. It's not a price point that I want to get to. So, yeah, the Dolphins 2K, I mean, you can even get nuts with Washington, to be honest. I don't love their secondary, but it's possible they can generate some pressure on Carson Wentz. And the one defense I guess I do like is the Colts, even though I was talking up Minshew and I do like Chark. I just think this is going to be an improved defense. I know they didn't generate a lot of pressure in the quarterback and they played at a slower pace, but DeForest Buckner, I love that addition, generates some pressure on the quarterback as well. And as much as I talked up Minshew, let's be honest, I mean, he didn't take care of the football all that well last season. He had some fumbles and some turnovers. So I think the Colts at 3K, if you want to spend up, that's pretty much as high as I would go.
Yeah, I agree. That is the one. If you are going to lay anything on defense, it is the Colts. Again, a low implied total here for the Jags, so they probably are not going to put up that many points, generally speaking. And again, the Colts do get to the quarterback fairly well in adding DeForest Buckner.
I wanted to say, why not the Chargers then at 2,800? I mean, I like Joe Burrow, but it's his first NFL game against that pass rush.
Absolutely.
They have a pretty nasty pass rush. Good cornerbacks, too.
Yeah, that's not a bad play either. All right, let's go to GPP here. Let's give a gamble at each position for GPP. Let's start with the running back. Chris, go ahead. You can start us off.
So the two backs that I really like actually is, Kenyon Drake and Miles Sanders. Sanders is in a good spot, but both of these backs are a little bit nicked up. So So I wonder if we're going to get them with a lower ownership. And plus, I look at Drake against San Fran, and you see on DK that that red third there, people may shy away. He was in a walking boot a couple weeks ago. But he returned to practice, and he was pretty decent in his 2 games against San Fran last year. 177 yards on 31 carries. 10 catches, and 6 of his 8 games, at least 3 grabs. So I know he's going to be involved in the offense, and I think this could be a bit of a high-scoring game. I mean, it's a high total at 48, and I'm sure San Fran's going to get theirs. But I think Joe Mixon is a little bit of a gamble. As somebody I don't trust in cash, and somebody I think that I can get a low ownership in GPP. So I lean him over Miles Sanders, but Miles Sanders is in a really plus spot too if you want to roll the dice on him.
How about you, Tags?
I'm going to say Aaron Jones. Nobody wants to play Aaron Jones anymore.
Everyone hates him.
They do, for whatever reason. He's one of the most efficient running backs in football. But this Vikings team lost so many starters that I don't think people realize just how many they lost. Jones tagged them for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground in 2 games they played last year, and this defense got worse. Let's be real about it. They got worse, and now they're missing their best pass rusher. Again, we've already talked about this when we were talking about Devontae Adams, but Aaron Jones in tournaments makes tons of sense because he's also a guy that gets it done in the passing game. So like on a site like DK where you're getting him at 6,900, when you have guys like, you were just talking about, Miles Sanders is going to be more popular. I would imagine Joe Mixon's probably going to be played more. These guys were drafted before Aaron Jones in season-long leagues, and people are going to see Minnesota like, oh, that's a tough matchup. I don't think it's a tough matchup. I really don't. Mm-hmm. So I would rather play Aaron Jones. Like, even if they were the same price, I'd play Aaron Jones over Alvin Kamara this week.
Okay. All right. Let's switch now to wide receiver. Give me a GPP gamble here. Chris, over at wide receiver.
So Jackson was actually my gamble, but Tag's going to talk me in as just maybe just roll them as a value. Fabian Moreau allowed 80% of his targets to be caught last season. It's just unbelievable to think about. And even though Jackson just played the one game, I'm nervous to play Jackson in cash because I just never know when he's going to get hurt or where he's going to come out, right? He only basically played one game last season. It was against Washington, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns on 8 catches. But I'll just stick inside the same game. And, I think McLaurin will probably be popular, and I think Antonio Gibson will be popular, but I like Steven Sims Jr. at $4,700. I really just noticed a connection between him and Haskins towards the end of the last season. I mean, 16 catches on 29 targets in his final 3 games, found the end zone 4 times. It's a pretty thin wide receiver core. I mean, I like Antonio Gandy-Golden, but he's probably more of a red zone threat. Sims, I just feel like some easy completions for him. And the Eagles secondary, I know it's a little bit more revamped with Slay. He's going to be on McLaurin, but there's still some holes and some injuries in that secondary. So I know it's not a sexy pick, but I feel like at 47 there's a gamble there that will pay off, and it'll allow you to do some other things with your lineup.
Yeah, he was on my list. No, absolutely. I think he's a guy who, it's a gamble, obviously, but that's what the title of the segment is. All right, Tags, go to you. Who do you got here?
I'm going to go DK Metcalf, 5,800 against the Falcons. This cornerback unit is not very good. Desmond Trufant wasn't good last year, but now they moved on from him, and now they're going to be starting a rookie, A.J. Terrell, in his spot. Rookie cornerbacks, they're going to have a tough time. Let's be real about it. Metcalf is someone that traditionally lined up in the left side of the formation, so I don't know if they're going to move Isaiah Oliver into Trufant's old spot or not, but it doesn't really matter because Isaiah Oliver is not very good at football. We've already seen it the last 2 years. He hasn't been very good. And knowing the connection between Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf, how it's evolved this offseason, looking at this matchup about producing a whole lot of fantasy points potentially. I know, Dan, you talked about this a few times.
Yep.
But DK, he's not only a guy that's going to get 8 targets, but he's a guy that has that one play potential, right? Correct. He has that Henry Ruggs, that John Ross upside where it's like there could be an 80-yard touchdown out of nowhere. We saw him continually grow as the year went on. I don't think you're going to see DK Metcalf in the $5,000 range for very long.
He's mispriced. Yeah, right. I'd play him in cash.
Yeah, I like Lockett a little better in cash, but I do like Metcalf in tournaments a little more because I do think that he has that massive upside. That you could see that Lockett doesn't necessarily bring with him at all times. But yeah, no, it's definitely, again, get any piece of that game that you can is kind of part of my biggest philosophy coming in. Let's go to quarterback here. We've talked a lot about, quarterbacks who I feel like you generally think of as more GPP plays, but we've talked about them in the cash game. But what do you think here, Chris, a GPP play at quarterback?
Yeah, it's tough. I usually like to maybe spend down quarterback, but we've really kind of touched on them all. Taylor and Trubisky, I think, are decent quarterbacks at that price. I don't know. I'll stick in the same range here. I probably won't, go there too often if I'm playing multiple lineups, maybe Dwayne Haskins. Again, it's a new offense. They've surrounded him with a little bit of weapons. I just talked about Sims and like McLaurin and Gibson out of the backfield. So, I mean, Scott Turner's going to come in and is really just going to set records compared to what they did last season, right? So, I mean, even Haskins, a bit of a rushing floor there, at least 23 rushing yards in 3 games. It was a small sample size. I believe he only appeared in 9 games, but he had a decent showing against the Eagles last year, 2 touchdowns, 261 yards, 26 rushing yards. So I honestly, if I had to choose in this price range, it probably is Taylor. You have to spend a little bit more at 56. And Tags mentioned Trubisky. Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller are pretty good targets
Easy stack.
Well. Yeah, for sure. It is. But, if we were looking for a huge gamble, it's probably Haskins.
How about you, Tex?
I would have said Trubisky. I also think that Aaron Rodgers is someone that, I know he's 6,300. Sure. He's overpriced, and I'm actually lower than the industry consensus on him in the rankings. But again, we've talked about this Minnesota defense and that they're starting 3 new cornerbacks. They have new pieces all over their defense. They're missing their best pass rusher. The game is in a dome. Aaron Rodgers, a retractable dome, whatever. But you can, these are... We have to say in tournaments, what has a 10% chance of happening, right? And Aaron Rodgers has shown us time and time again where it was very boom or bust last year. And all we know is that the Packers all season, they've talked about, let's go and we're going to grab running backs. We're going to run the ball. We're going to grab Jordan Love. And everything screams we're going away from Aaron Rodgers. What if it's okay, everybody's going to be expecting us to run the ball. Let's go out and just throw the ball down their throats. They can do that against Minnesota. They really can. So knowing Rodgers, the games that he's had, over the last couple of years, some of the biggest games in fantasy, why not take a shot?
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad play. Let me ask something, because we've talked about nearly every quarterback on the slate. We haven't touched on Teddy Bridgewater at all. I mean, we're thinking that, there are going to be points scored, obviously, on both sides of that game. The Raiders were terrible against the pass, 31st in DVOA last year. Is Bridgewater a guy who anybody's targeting? He's got all the weapons, or do we just think it's going to be running? Because he was a guy who I might be looking at a little bit in tournaments.
Yeah, it's probably not for me, but I do like his weapons. You bring up a good point. I mean, CMC, and you got DJ Moore there. They're probably going to have to throw the ball more than they want to, slow the pace down. They even all year, they'll probably play in a lot of high total games, right? Because they're going to give up a lot of points, and it's going to force Bridgewater to throw the football. It's not a bad play.
And I think the Raiders are going to be able to score points in this game. That's the thing.
Should,
and I think they're right. And because of that, and again, I think this also probably gets into the fact that I think Bridgewater's generally been a little undervalued in just the fantasy market, generally speaking. So I think for a game like this, and again, he's got some familiarity, obviously, with Joe Brady. We talked about, people switching teams and everything like that. But in this first game, they're going to need points, in my opinion, because their defense is so bad and the Raiders are going to be able to put up stuff. And they're going to need to throw on it, whether it's dump offs to McCaffrey or, again, he's got the 3 weapons at wide receiver. I could see sort of, and I don't think he's going to be particularly owned, especially because, again, we haven't even talked about him. We've talked about every quarterback on this slate except him. So, in a tournament, that's sort of something where I might be looking at. All right, let's go to tight end here. Who's your GPP play, Chris?
I'm going to gamble on Gronk. Why not? 4,900, a high total game. I probably won't play too much Gronk this year. I don't have a lot of shares in season-long league. He may only catch 30 balls, but 10 of them may go for touchdowns. Uncertainty with Mike Evans. So I'll gamble with Gronk, $4,900. To be honest, I probably won't have a lot of shares because I'll just want to spend up and almost $1,000 for Zach Ertz or drop right down to Jack Doyle. But I think Gronk's a pretty good gamble.
How about you, Tex?
Honestly, I think Mark Andrews is going to be under-owned. He's probably my favorite tournament one because most people in tournaments, what they're looking for is a tight end that's really low-priced, but you can go contrarian and say, I'm going to pay up. And if someone usually pays up, they're going to try and either get up to George Kittle or they're going to go to Zach Ertz because he's 5,800. Meanwhile, Mark Andrews, a guy who played minimal snaps last year, was crushing it, and he's a true breakout candidate. The Browns, the safeties are in trouble. They have no linebackers. Mark Andrews can blow up this week. So in tournaments, he's great. I also think Darren Waller is a good option too.
Yeah, I like the contrarian play with Andrews because he's the second highest priced guy on the slate, and yet most people are probably going to be like we've been talking about, saving money where they can or pivoting off to Ertz. So I do like that. All right, let's finish up here. Let's get to the stack of the week. Chris, who are you stacking this week?
There's 2 stacks I'll throw out here. I'm going to throw out Wilson and Metcalf. I like the Metcalf call there earlier by tags, and I'll actually bring it back with Todd Gurley. Is one running back we didn't talk about. I think he'll catch a lot of balls out of the backfield, and if there's a time that he's healthy, it's probably right now, week 1. And I also like the Philly stack with Wentz, Ertz, and Jackson. I think there's going to be a lot there. Like I said earlier, I feel like Wentz is going to throw the football a lot more than what people would expect against a Washington, pretty weak secondary, really.
Yep. Yeah, I like both of those. How about you, Tags?
Todd Gurley, fun fact, I wanted to bring him up, but I know we run out of time. But he has scored 11 total touchdowns in the 5 games he's played against the Seahawks in his career. So clearly Pete Carroll doesn't have an answer for Todd Gurley.
Right.
That's an interesting one because my stack was actually Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and then bringing it back with Julio. That game, you want to find the right combination in that game. I really do believe it, because that's a game where if the Falcons can somehow get out early, or if the Seahawks are, because in a neutral game script, the Seahawks are not going to throw the ball. Right. That's the part that worries me. We need Atlanta to stay out in front, or at least keep that game very close, because otherwise it's going to turn into a run affair. But the Seahawks, will it turn into the let Russ cook thing? Like, are they going to let Russell Wilson throw the ball with the options that they've surrounded him with this offseason, and like even going back to last year's draft? I think they're going to throw the ball more, and if that happens inside the Dome in Atlanta, this game can produce like tons of fireworks.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think in the Dome, I really am just pretty much the entire season, but even in this game, very bullish on Atlanta's offense now with, another year under Cutter. I think, we love Calvin Ridley. Tags. We've talked about him nonstop. Yep. We love Hayden Hurst, obviously Julio. I think they are going to be able to put up points in this first game, so I do see this as more of a shootout. How about the lock of the week? What do you think, Chris? Who's your guy, or a couple of guys that you are just guaranteed feeling like they're your locks?
Well, I'll change my tune because I think Tags likes Jacobs. He said he was going to talk about him a little bit later. He might find the end zone 2 or 3 times this weekend. Tags is like, if I was picking touchdown locks, it's certainly him. Sure. And I know I've talked so much about Zach Ertz, but I do feel like he's a pretty darn good lock as well. Honestly, like all the cash game plays that we talked about earlier just seem like locks to find the end zone, and that's why we like them. So Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs for me. I don't know if there's another one, Tags, that you like. Maybe
what do you got, Tags? Are you mad now? Are you mad that there was Jacobs?
I'm not mad. I mean, Jacobs is like definitely, he was going to be my lock. I would say Devontae Adams is another player. He's going to be in almost every one of my lineups. He's mispriced. Like Devontae Adams this week should be, I would say, at least 8,200.
100%, yeah.
That's where I think he should be.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs should be at least 75, if not $8,000, considering the matchup that he has in front of him. So yeah, both those guys are going to be in. I will say, I know people say don't overexpose yourself to certain players. Depends on how many lineups you're setting. In cash games, obviously, you're usually rolling with one lineup. But I'm probably going to have at least 50% ownership to both these players.
Awesome. You know what, guys? I don't know if you knew this, but there's football tonight. Like
baby.
Actual NFL football tonight. We're finally here. Chris, thank you for coming on the show. Great information as always, and look forward to the next time you come on.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the football, and can't wait to talk to you guys again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, good luck with your DFS lineups, everybody. We're going to be back tomorrow previewing every game for this weekend, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to help give you the edge you need in your fantasy football league.